Meghan Markle has stunned her spare Harry by demanding he severs ties with his last remaining friends in the royal family. Always keenly aware of toxicity, the difficult Duchess has warned her hapless husband that his close relationship with scandal-hit cousins Beatrice and Eugenie must end. As the criminal net closes in on their disgraced father Andrew, amid calls for their devious mother Sarah Ferguson to also be investigated by police, the princess's gilded life is unravelling fast. And while the devastated daughters look on helplessly as their pariah parents plunge deeper and deeper into shame, they too are falling from grace in spectacular fashion. It has become uncomfortably clear that B, 37, and 35-year-old Eugenie's frantic efforts to be seen as innocent victims of Andrew and Fergie's sickening behaviour may well all have been a desperate attempt to hide the truth about their own involvement with billionaire paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And while there is no suggestion that they in any way broke the law, the sisters are named hundreds of times in the Epstein files, and according to shock reports, B helped their mendacious mum get back into Epstein's good books after she sought to save her own reputation by publicly branding him a child sex abuser and brazenly lied that she would never have any contact with him again. Even more damagingly, just 5 days after the terrible tycoon was released following his 13 months jail term for soliciting prostitution from a minor, Fergie took B and Eugenie to lunch at his Florida mansion, where they dined on vegetable lasagna prepared by his Parisian chef. Inevitably, before jetting across the Atlantic, the revoltingly venal then Duchess of York checked with Epstein that he was paying their first-class airfares. He was, at a cost of $14,000. At first, there was an outpouring of sympathy for the poor princesses. How could a mother take her young daughters to see a convicted paedophile? But then it began to dawn on shocked royal watchers that, at the time, in 2009, B was 20 and Eugenie was 19. Not little girls, fully grown adults who must have known all about their mother's evil benefactor. In other bad news, it is well documented that B was front and centre of the negotiations that led to her notoriously thick dad's disastrous 2019 interview with the BBC. Was she aware of the grim facts, or was she too deceived by awful Andrew's vast and tangled tissue of lies? Either way, King Charles and Prince William's initial instinct to treat kindly the problem-plagued princesses has given way to increasing suspicions that while not involved in their scrounging parents' pathetic addiction to Epstein's money and jet-set generosity, they certainly knew all about it. Beatrice even accompanied Andrew on his mysterious business trips to the Middle East and China. And who paid the bills for fun-loving B's 17 holidays in 2015 to glamorous, astronomically expensive destinations, including ritzy Saint-Tropez, Ibiza and Mexico? It could hardly have been her. She was working for Sony then, on a lowly annual salary of £19,500. Armed with more and more damning information about the York girls, William and Kate's attitude has hardened, and even the famously soft-hearted king is now harbouring serious doubts. Enter Meghan, a meticulously careful curator of her public image, with a track record for dumping friends the moment they attract bad publicity. Ask her former best pal, Canadian socialite Jessica Mulroney. Accused of displaying white privilege by a black influencer, Jessica was instantly cut off by the ruthless Ms. Markle, and the once inseparable bosom buddies have not spoken since. But while the Duchess wasted no time in banishing B and Eugenie, Harry is hating having to follow suit. Sadly, he's under orders from her ladyship, and even he comprehends the infectious nature of the Andrew sleaze dragging his daughters down. And while he seeks to improve his own popularity, the dim Duke cannot be seen in their poisonous orbit. Nevertheless, he is shattered by the parting of the ways when the rest of the royals understandably wash their hands of him after his disgraceful accusations to Oprah Winfrey that they were racists, his horrible Netflix series and his spiteful book Spare. Loyal cousins Bea and Eugenie stood by him. He despises their father, his wicked Uncle Andrew, but always got on like a house on fire with his daughters. And apart from sporadic awkward contact with his estranged father, the king, the genial York sisters were the sole members of the regal clan Harry could talk to and be kept up to speed with family gossip. Now that his only lifeline to his former existence in Britain has been destroyed, unhappy Harry is lonelier than ever, lost in West Coast space. His strange behaviour recently, shaking and sobbing as he addressed grieving parents of children who perished due to online harm, caused concern over his mental health. But at least old Ginger Nuts has finally been seen with Meghan again. After a series of solo appearances sparked talk that all was not well in their marriage, the gruesome twosome were all smiles and togetherness as they enjoyed a night out at a Los Angeles basketball game. Hoops, beer, peanuts, and the roar of the raucous crowd. Who said romance was dead?
Regarding Andrew, I think he should be treated like everybody else. If this was like your next door neighbour and you found out that he'd been messing about and sexually assaulting girls, despite the fact that he denies it, he would be hung, drawn and quartered. So why shouldn't Andrew be hung, drawn and quartered? You know, at the end of the day, you know, he's abused his position, he's brought disrepute on the royal family, and let's face it, when he goes to prison, it'll be in a nice little private sector. It won't be like if I did anything, I'd be put in with general population, you know, and God knows what would happen to me. But he won't, he'll be protected all the time. So, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander in my eyes.
Thank you for that, Pete. And you're, of course, right to stress that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor denies all allegations that face him. But I take your point. It's very considered. Sean in Gloucester, top of the morning, Mark. I'm totally convinced that Keith Stalin has lied to Trump over the Chagos Islands and is doing everything he can to destroy any relationship that we have with the US by denying permission to use our bases. I used to think he was useless. Now I think he's dangerous, says Sean. Sharon, good morning, Mark. I love the shirt this morning. Well, if you don't know what I'm wearing, why don't you head over to YouTube, search Talk, watch the live thing, and up we pop. Sharon says he has not paid the price, Andrew, not suffered enough for what he's done. And then what took the police so long to arrest him? That's Sharon, not happy. Andrew is trade envoy. Did he ever have to sign the Official Secrets Act? Did he have to sign an NDA detailing what information was not to be given to third parties? And for now, Christina says, good morning, Mark. Starmer is a fool. It frightens me that he's supporting the Iranian regime by not backing America while their ordinary people in Iran are being hurt. He's backing the wrong people as usual. Get to more of your feedback shortly. Paul Cox, has Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor suffered enough?
Well, he's definitely suffered. I think for a man that's... And by the way, this is just to add balance, because it's important to stress this, and this is a man who's not been convicted of anything yet. So by that standard, yes, it is getting to a point where he has been under tremendous pressure, but probably rightly so, I would say. If you are in that position of authority and for so many years you've probably taken advantage of it, then you deserve to be held to account, as anyone should be. And look, anecdotally, the people I know that have met him have said that he's not a particularly nice guy, full of arrogance. And I'd imagine there's quite a few people out there that are feeling like he's got his just desserts at the moment. I don't think that the process is going to be the punishment enough, though. I think if what we're seeing within the Epstein files in terms of in high office giving away secrets, I think there's a huge issue for him there. I think the sexual impropriety, there's a lot of stuff going on there, but I'm not sure that's what we're definitely not discussing that right now, but I'm not sure that's going to be the thing that scuppers him. I think it's going to be this dealing in information that is secret, that is important to the UK, and handing it over. If he has done anything like that in his position as an envoy, his position as an ex-prince, a member of the royal family, then he's going to be in serious trouble.
Well, it's got echoes of Al Capone, hasn't it? The famous gangster who was ultimately appropriated not through murder and selling drugs and narcotics and all the rest of it. They got him on his taxes.
Yes,
and could that be the equivalent for Andrew, where Andrew stands accused of trafficking young women for sex, potentially underage women? He denies those allegations, but is it possible that those things are very hard to prove, whereas what you've got with the envoy stuff is a digital paper trail? You've got emails. Dear Jeffrey, here's the latest from my meeting with Vietnam.
And I would say that he's not the brightest penny either, and there will be email trails. You know, this is someone. The trouble with arrogance is you put yourself above absolutely everybody else. You don't think you're ever going to be held to account, so you just become completely, you know, without any sort of rules for yourself at all. So you just carry on as if you're always gonna, with impunity,
like a sort of recklessness.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So I think that if this is true, and if there is evidence in the Epstein files, and they were to compare it with what's in the former Prince Andrew's email trail at Buck House, and I think they're probably going to find something.
Well, that's right. And what I found very interesting and instructive yesterday, Paul, is my assumption, which we know assumption is the mother of all disaster.
Yes.
But my assumption was that if he was done for sharing the minutes of bilateral meetings with other governments and sending that stuff to Epstein, that it would be the equivalent of a white-collar crime, which is therefore a slap on the wrist, 18 months suspended. I had a top lawyer on the show yesterday. He said, not at all. He said, if he's guilty of what he stands accused of, he goes to jail.
Yes, and a maximum term of life, by the way, because it's such an important position.
It's national security. I mean, it's our economy.
Exactly. NDAs are kind of almost negligent at this point. You're signing the Official Secrets Act at the highest possible level, so it's treason. You know, it's close to treason. You will get in serious trouble if you go. Yeah, it's insider trading as well. That's why Epstein wants. Epstein needs information in order to have something over somebody, to make money for himself or to make money for his clients. And if when all this is done and dusted, should he be found guilty of anything, we need to identify why. Why was he doing this? What was in it for him? Well, because it's such a high risk. You can see what's in it for Epstein. I still can't see what's in it for Andrew, unless, of course, all the other stuff is true, and therefore he was doing that as a quid pro quo.
Well, exactly. I mean, the allegations would be that what was in it for Andrew, two things: money and sex. Now, he'll deny that very, very vociferously. But what we have in relation to this story is allegations of young Russian girls, hot Romanians, flown into Stansted, 90 flights in the course of a decade, coming into Stansted, private jet, which is not subject to the normal checks and balances of a Ryanair flight from Alicante, sadly.
No.
And then you've got the suggestion that young women dined at Buckingham Palace in the company of Epstein and as the guest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. So my suggestion, and I'm so happy for Andrew to walk away a free man having disproved these claims, innocent till proven guilty, but you know, these young women, and then cash. Don't forget, Sarah Ferguson is perennially bankrupt, and there is some evidence that he was essentially trying to help Sarah Ferguson by getting cash from Epstein to help out.
Well, what a sorry state of affairs. I mean, none of these people should be bankrupt. It takes a certain level of ineptitude, to be without money in their position. You have to be extremely frivolous. You have to be extremely uncareful with your money to be poor as a senior member of the royal family or associated to. They're living lifestyles way beyond their means, and I think it's hedonistic, and they've got just far too involved and disconnected too much with reality, it feels like to me.
Well, I completely agree, and we know, what is it, power corrupts, or absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you've got someone like Andrew, well, unlimited privilege and wealth and titles and status and position, and not too much accountability. I mean, there've been cops on royal property for the last couple of days now. Normally when there's a cop near Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, It's a bodyguard.
Yes.
And now it's flipped and they're hunting him down. The question I've got for you, the issue is, we talked about money, we talked about allegations of sexual impropriety, and let's not forget there's a woman 6 feet under who took her own life, Virginia Giuffre, who Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor wrote a cheque to for £12 million, which we understand was courtesy of the largesse of the Queen. Now, obviously you've got to be careful, not put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5. There's an element of concern here about our national security, because it could be that Andrew was giving Epstein what he needed in order to keep that relationship going, keep the gravy train coming financially to help Fergie, to keep the girls coming, allegations he denies. But there's another concern, which is there are links between Epstein and the Kremlin and the KGB. And that's very serious, because what that means is that Andrew might have been Vladimir Putin's useful idiot. And at that point, this goes beyond money and sex and becomes something even more serious.
Yes, and I do genuinely believe that he's a bit of a silly Billy, Andrew, and he will quite easily get himself into
And he
these
might
positions.
have walked into this of unwittingly becoming Vladimir Putin's useful idiot, the younger brother of the king,
Yes.
in cahoots with a man who is an international bad actor and a danger to this country.
Oh, and it's an incredibly huge scandal of the ages, of generations, of hundreds of years.
Russia are the enemy. And
Yes,
you've got,
and we keep
you've got an
forgetting that as
allegation
well.
that Andrew is siding with the enemy, Andrew helping the enemy, the brother of the head of state of the United Kingdom.
By the way, they're all the enemy. Even our allies are our enemy. You have to keep your information close. You can't just be sharing it. And if you're Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, then you'll know that better than anybody. You know, he would have grown up in and around knowing that those secrets are secrets for a reason, and just to dismiss all of that for his own benefit and possibly for the benefit of his urges and needs or his ex-missus seems to me a completely frivolous waste.
Sharon says, Mark, what about the bloody victims? Bill says, good morning, Mark. If Andrew is stripped of his 8th position to the throne, I hope Mandelson loses his title. How about this from Sharon, another Sharon? I really don't care, Mark, if he does anything to himself. I'm not concerned about him one bit. All the years when he was rude and obnoxious and thinking he was better than everyone else, he's paying the price now. Andrew, and concerns about his health. I'm sure there are concerns about his mental health, but there are concerns for tens of thousands of I can't read the rest of that. Apologies. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think we've got a glitch there on the line. Can I ask you a simple question, Paul? Do you feel sorry for Andrew?
That we're all human, and I hope somebody is looking out for him. So I hope he's got someone.
Why do you hope that?
Because the idea that...
Because Sharon doesn't care.
No,
Sharon is like,
Sharon...
let him rot.
No, look, and Sharon has every right to that view, and I completely understand it. And maybe if you ask me at another time, I might think the same way as Sharon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is someone's dad. This is someone's uncle. They don't like him.
He's a human being.
He's a human being. I'd like to make sure he's protected from essentially finishing his own life.
Most definitely. Listen, folks, so much to get through. Next up, has Keir Starmer just torn up the special relationship? Should we support America's airstrikes on Iran? Plus, more front pages and a fresh scandal for Labour. This is Talk Breakfast. Listen, folks, so many messages coming in. Do you feel sorry for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor? Hev in Kent. Good morning, Hev. How are you this morning? Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Hev says, Mark, I totally agree with you. Andrew needs to be on self-harm watch. He needs to have his day in court, and the victims need to see this for their healing if he's found guilty of misdoings. It's all very sad, but it needs finalising. This from another listener. Mark, you need to stop talking this nonsense. To think about Virginia Giuffre. She's a human being. She committed suicide because of Andrew. I really do think you have lost the plot this morning. It's the first time I've ever disagreed with you. Sharon, thank you for disagreeing with me, because it's not an echo chamber. And let me tell you, Sharon, you are entitled to your opinion. Sharon, not happy with my remarks there about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. What do you think? Do you agree with Sharon? Let me know. 6:39, and Fergus is in London. Good morning, Fergus.
Good morning, Mark.
Top of the morning.
I've spoken to you for years.
Listen, it's been too long. First of all, where'd you get your energy from? It's 6:39.
I know.
You should be half asleep. Have you had your 3 Weetabix yet?
Yeah, no, I've had 5. No,
Listen, top man. Now, Fergus, what's on your mind this morning?
Rubbish.
Go on.
Royal rubbish. I don't care about Andrew. I don't care if he's 20th to the throne. What about the Portugosians? What about the rape gangs? Oh, let's just talk about Andrew.
Do you think, Fergus, are you suggesting, Fergus, that the Andrew story is a distraction from the real problems facing this country?
Yeah, and I love your tie, by the way.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you're very kind. For those not listening or watching on YouTube, I'm wearing a very velvety tie, which, can I be honest with you, Paul and Fergus, it's TK Maxx's finest. Fergus, are you familiar with TK Maxx?
Yes.
It's not bad, is it?
No, it's not bad at all.
It's all the gear that the brands couldn't sell in their normal shops. So it goes off. I know. It's just the second division.
It's an exclusive jumble sale as well.
That's exactly what it is. The first thing you have to do when you go to TK Maxx, Fergus, first thing you have to do when you go in there is...
there as well.
What's that?
Coxie Woxie. Yeah,
Coxie's very good. The first thing you have to do, Fergus, when you go to a TK Maxx is tidy the place up.
Yeah, you do feel like you should.
Yeah, first thing, it's an hour of like folding jumpers and putting shirts back on hangers, and then I can start buying
What you've
stuff.
got to do is comb your hair.
Listen, this hair, can I tell you that someone said it was a wig, and I thought to myself, would you pay for a wig like that?
I love your hair, Mark.
It's a work in progress. What do you think about what Fergus has had to say there, Paul? Do you think that Andrew is the fall guy actually for other news stories that are more important, the rape gangs, the economy, Chagos Islands?
Yeah. First of all, good morning, Fergus. I do get incredibly frustrated with how distracted we become. I think, can you imagine if we'd put this much effort into the grooming gangs? The grooming gangs...
Oh, my God.
It just wouldn't have got to the point that it did, and I feel like it just feels like easy pickings with Andrew. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that I agree with anything that's gone on or they shouldn't be arrested, but the idea that we are focusing on that above lots of other things we could do, to me, I do think is a distraction, Fergus. I think you're right.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? I've got a message here, Fergus, from... Let's have a look. It is... Oh, my goodness gracious. Where has this gone now? Because there's an important message. This is live radio. Let's find it. Talk among yourselves. You see, this is the problem. I'm not that good with technology.
That's what I love. I love TalkTV. I do.
Well, that's so nice of you. I would have been anorexic and suicidal by now if I was Andrew, says one texter. Pete says 12 million quid. Didn't another Epstein woman sue Jeffrey for that money afterwards? Do you remember, Mark, that Mountbatten-Windsor was one of the driving factors in a young mother taking her own life? Did we see him doing everything to prevent that? No, we did not. Steve says, good morning, Mark and Paul. All of you media presenters keep pointing out that Andrew denies all the accusations. Well, to quote Mandy Rice Davies, he would say that, wouldn't he?
Wouldn't he? Yeah, I remember that.
Where do you see this playing out? Fergus, what do you think is going to happen to Andrew? Do you think he will go to jail eventually?
No, nothing will happen to Andrew. He'll live in a lovely palace somewhere. He should be sent off to Dubai. I don't care what happens to him. I really, really don't care what happens to him. But I do care about the rape gangs. Yeah? Oh, no, we can't talk about that. No, we can't talk about the rape gangs. No, because we've got to talk about Andrew. He's immaterial. He's never going to be king.
Fergus, from your point of view, if we're to park the Andrew story, you got the rape gangs. What are the other important things we should be talking about?
Rape gangs and illegal immigrants. Oh, sorry, no, we can't call them that, can we? We can call them unofficial entrants or something.
That's exactly right. Irregular migrants, Fergus. Please, watch your privilege, Fergus. You've got to be politically correct.
No, sorry. Irregular migrants. And don't talk about Ash Wednesday. Talk about Ramadan. Yeah. Oh, yeah. What country is this? I can't remember. I thought it was Britain. I did think it was Britain. I really, really thought it was Britain. But apparently it isn't now.
Fergus, powerful words. Listen, we could chat all morning. You're full of beans. Thank you for the call. Good morning, Mark, says Mike in Dorset. Great show. As regards Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, where is America in all of the Epstein debacle? From my perspective, I see a woman in jail, Ghislaine Maxwell, and an ex-English prince. Where are the American prosecutions? Let's point the finger at a woman and Britain. Not good. And also from Natasha. Good morning, Mark. Why is there not the same furore over Mandelson as there is over Andrew? Is there a sense that Andrew is the fall guy in relation to these Jeffrey Epstein allegations, Paul? Because we've got Bill Gates, who stands accused of trying to put antibiotics into his wife's food because he had an STD that he picked up from Russian models. You've got Bill Clinton, who used the Lolita Express private jet as a bus service. You've got questions about Donald Trump. Why are these folk not facing censure in the way that Andrew is?
Well, it's political. I mean, it's convenient here for Andrew to be the centre of attention. It would be inconvenient for Mandelson to be, and in the States it would be very inconvenient for anyone to be involved, because Donald Trump is linked. You know, at the top of the establishment across the pond, it's the same as here. They're all linked in one way or the other. If you take the Clintons down, you take Bill Gates down, then there's no reason why you can't take anybody else down. They will be looking at Andrew and thinking, crikey, if they can do that to Andrew, then it can happen to almost anybody. But it is entirely political, and it's about political inconvenience and political convenience.
Well, is it anti-British in a way on the part of the Americans that the US establishment are using a member of the royal family, throwing him under the bus, letting him be the whipping boy so that they can escape justice? You know, because the problem you've got with royals, they don't generally sue people. I know Harry does, but leading members of the royal family tend not to sue anyone, and they tend not to respond to allegations. They just never explain, never complain. So that makes someone like Andrew more vulnerable than others.
Well, this never explain.
He can't defend himself.
Never complain, never. They're going to have to do a lot of explaining, because if, say, Andrew was to be convicted and be sent to prison, well, who knew what? We already seen in the papers today that they're urging bodyguards to come forward and say, what did you see? You know, you have a responsibility. And, I mean, that puts them in a very difficult position, because they go into these positions knowing that they can't really talk about what they see.
Yeah.
But what did the rest of the royal family know? How much do you really know about your brother? But if it's going on, all these buildings are central to this family. The comings and goings have to be very much measured and you know, tracked.
Sure.
So the idea that everything can go on without anybody knowing is impossible, absolutely impossible. So it'll be very interesting to see. I can see why people like Fergus say that nobody's ever going to get convicted, no one's ever going to go to prison, because it would be unprecedented. But if somebody was to, then this Epstein issue could bring down nearly every aspect and corner of the British establishment, and absolutely it should start bringing down people in the US as well, because the reason this proliferated for so long is because people knew they could get away with it, and they'll still believe that. They'll still believe that. They just it just needs. These are just shots across the bow at the moment. But if you start seeing Bill Clinton get arrested, Bill Gates get arrested,
right,
then we are really going to see things unravel quite quickly, I think.
Most definitely. This is a man, Charlotte, that many don't like, many won't defend. He's been found guilty, though, of no crime. Has he suffered enough?
Well, I do agree with your callers who said it was slightly kind of medieval, the point we've got to now, where it's kind of a sport, really, just camping outside his house. Obviously, that picture of him in the back of the car is, I have to say, you know, a journalist's dream, because it just summarises the whole story. It was on the front page of every single newspaper. But he looked incredibly haunted and, you know, unwell, basically. And I hope there's been a lot of suicides around this Jeffrey Epstein saga. Obviously, Virginia herself, Epstein himself. It would be, if something were to happen to him, I do think there would be a slight, I hate to say it, blood on our hands. You know, as a nation, have we made too much of a sport of this, of chasing him, following him? But, you know, a picture of him with that little boy rolling a ball that looked like a breast yesterday made me think, equally, something really bad could come out in coming weeks or months, and maybe we'll think he got his just desserts. It's a difficult one. And the person I'm really worried about, by the way, is Fergie, because Fergie is in a really bad way. And the nation has had a very strange relationship with Fergie over the years. You know, she suffered a lot in the early years and people called her the Duchess of Pork, but she always had a strange affection, really. She always came back time after time. People loved the fact that she was really who she was, and she always admitted I've got flaws and, you know, I'm just a normal person. And people sort of loved her for that. And now what I'm hearing is that she's in a very bad way. In fact, there is a big piece about that in the Mail today.
Well, it'll be a fascinating thing to look at that story, because you have to wonder whether Sarah Ferguson is a safeguarding risk.
Definitely she's a safeguarding risk. And I think I know her daughters have been shepherding her around recently, but they have cut off Andrew altogether. So Andrew's not being shepherded. Andrew's alone on his 66th birthday, then gets arrested, then gets returned to Sandringham on his own. Meanwhile, at least Sarah's got her daughters and access to her grandchildren, I think, because they've been going on holidays kind of actually all around the globe trotting. But Sarah is kind of, I know that she's in a bad mental way because she's delusional at the moment. She wants to move back to Windsor and live near the royal estate, the Windsor Great Park estate. So not only is she in a bad way, but she's burying her head in the sand. She still thinks she can live her old life and she's desperate to be close to Windsor so she can be near her girls, but also, I suppose, so she can walk around Windsor Great Park and wave to people and still have that sort of feeling that she's slightly royal. And that ship has obviously sailed. So I also think she's kind of not living in reality at the same time.
Where does this leave Charles? We had a statement saying that the law must take its course. The palace will be supportive of the authorities' efforts to interrogate these allegations. Should the king, at a certain point, Charlotte, address the nation?
I think he should. I think he should address the nation. I think once the police have concluded their work, that would be the best time. And he's got the perfect excuse. He can't really speak to the nation while the investigation's going on. And I think he'd be wise to wait until the Royal Lodge search is finished, because there's absolutely mountains to go through in Royal Lodge. And what I was hearing is that the Yorks are actually quite nervous because they didn't finish their clear up. Because if you remember, Andrew had to leave for Norfolk a bit earlier than planned.
So he left reportedly removal vans turned up in the dead of night.
Yeah, and they removed the basics, but it's full of clutter and rubbish. And among that clutter and rubbish, there could be something really damaging. We don't know. And they are still searching Royal Lodge, and the search will probably go on till Monday, which I think shows quite how much there is to go through. And if you think the 3 million Epstein files are absolutely stuffed to the rafters with horrifying facts and revelations, I have to say it's pretty likely that the same will happen at Royal Lodge. There's got to be something that could be very damaging there. So I think the king would be wise to hold back until everything that can come out has come out. Although I have to say the Epstein files will probably keep coming out for years to come. But yeah, I think he should speak, but he should be patient about it.
What do you think are the king's predominant emotions in relation to his brother Andrew? Concern or anger?
I think probably more concern, actually, because I know Anne and Edward are concerned about Andrew, and they took his shotgun licences away, which you and I have spoken about a few times now. Yeah. But it's just so telling that they were really worried about him. And, you know, at the end of the day, Charles is a very compassionate man, and he's a real softie, actually. Unlike William, who's hard as nails and is incredibly, you know, for example, with Harry, he's cut Harry off. I don't think if Harry was going through a big traumatic media event or even a sort of police event, I just don't think William would feel any sympathy for Harry. However, I think the king will feel sympathy for his brother, because his brother's guilty of the family trait, which Harry has too, which is stupidity as well. And you just feel through the Epstein files that this is a man who, of course, should have known better, and of course made some really horrible decisions. But, you know, also was just being taken advantage of because he's so stupid by Epstein. You can tell that in the Epstein files, that he's completely manipulated. And I think the king will be well aware of that, because the king is one of the brighter members of the royal family. And he was the one that advised that Andrew didn't become a trade envoy, because Charles knew this. He's too stupid. He'll fall for every trap in the book. He'll go around playing golf and chasing women and disgracing himself. And he's not bright enough to make well-informed decisions. So I think, in a funny sort of way, I think Charles will be quite sympathetic about that as well.
Indeed. Lots of messages coming in thick and fast, Charlotte. Eugenie, appropriately named, in Bexhill-on-Sea, says, good morning, Mark. If anything happens to Andrew, a lot of information goes with him. So I'm worried in the sense that if he goes, information goes as well. Sharon says, no, Charlotte, we will not have blood on our hands. Not at all. We don't care if Andrew and Fergie are in a bad way. Who cares? They have blood on their hands for all the awful things they've done. Well, of course, Sharon, you're entitled to your view. Andrew denies all allegations against him. Terry says thousands of young white girls raped and murdered, and you go on about this squirrel diversion. Do you think there's any sense in which this Andrew story is a distraction from other issues facing the country, Charlotte, or are we entitled to be giving it due coverage?
I think we are entitled to be giving it due coverage, and I agree with Sharon. This is the worst scandal to have ever happened to the monarchy. It's totally shocking, and it does deserve to be on every front page. And it's not really a distraction because it doesn't take many pages to get into a newspaper, and all the other issues are in there. There is just so much news globally. It's a crazy time. It's just where you choose to divert your attention to, I suppose.
Well, most definitely. And Charlotte, how do we see things playing out in the days ahead? Because the problem for the royal family is that this police investigation and any legal proceedings that follow are going to take months, if not years.
Yes, because royal events, which are the bread and butter of what the monarchy does, may as well be on hold. You know, Prince William did an interview on BBC Radio 1, I think, about mental health the day before Andrew got arrested. And it was all completely blasted out of the water. It barely got half a page in some newspapers. So I think the royal family are going to have to work out what they're going to do, how they're going to continue to work. Because actually the causes, if they do any more mental health campaigns, for example, that might not sit very well with all this coverage about Andrew, and if it gets any coverage at all. So I do think things will start to die down a bit until the police conclude their work. But I do also think the royal family are going to dial down a bit too.
Well, most definitely. I don't like Andrew. I don't want to defend him as a human being. The allegations are serious. He denies them, Charlotte. But I want him on the planet so that he can tell the police and the authorities what he knows. I'd like this resolved as an issue. Last but not least, do we know who's going to pay Andrew's legal costs, which will run into many thousands?
That's such an interesting question. I don't think it will be King Charles. I just wonder whether he'll call on some of his mates in the Middle East to pay.
Which in itself is compromising.
Yeah, the whole thing is a mess. It doesn't look good at all if you have the, say, I don't know, the Crown Prince of Bahrain or someone like that paying. But then again, it looks terrible if King Charles pays. But I think Charles will feel obliged to carry on paying his board and lodgings.
Well, the Prime Minister gets a little breather, doesn't he, as a result of the Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor allegations. He's not been on the front page, and even the Mandelson issue seems to have temporarily blown over.
Yeah, it seems that with this Epstein case, it kind of swings between Mandelson and Andrew about who's in the spotlight, but very much Andrew in the spotlight today. I mean, it's astonishing, really. He's obviously been called in for questioning, released now. The police are still searching his homes, and the latest is that the government is drafting legislation to remove him from the line of succession. I think lots of your listeners will be pretty shocked he's still in that line of succession.
It's astonishing.
He obviously was stripped of his royal titles, his royal roles, but there's a kind of technicality which that piece of legislation had not been drafted and passed, and you have to take that through Parliament in order to actually remove him because of our constitution. And interestingly, I learnt this morning that actually each of the Commonwealth countries will also need to approve it. So it looks like that's going to be legislation that gets bounced around the world.
Well, most definitely, and it's going to be a fascinating and protracted process. A big reaction to our conversation around Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Amy in Suffolk says, Mark, Andrew has children and an ex-wife all willing to take him when he was enjoying the best life. They should be the ones looking after him now. Gary says, Mark, FFS. Stop with the crying over Andy's mental health. Nobody is delighted about being arrested. This from another, it's Sarah. The Andrew, formerly known as Prince, only has to implicate the Labour Party members or others, Muslims, and his case will be closed as they get away with everything. And how about this from an unnamed texter? Good morning. You say our opinions matter, given your claim of being the home of free speech, and yet you never read out any of my texts. What a joke. Well, I've done just that. Next time, put your name on. And what I'll do is I'll fast track you. Whoever you are, I'll put you at the top of the list. What about this from Paul? Mark, great show normally, but for goodness sake, can you not move on to something else other than Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor? It's a tricky story, isn't it? It's a challenge facing broadcasters and newspaper editors how much to cover this, but the bottom line is it's the King's younger brother, and it is the mother of all scandals.
I think it's a huge scandal. It's also, you know, we cover news every day, but what you're seeing on these front pages is history. You know, not for nearly a century have we had someone removed from the line of succession. That was obviously Edward when he abdicated to marry a divorcee, and so it's kind of the combination of lots of things. This story, it's the Epstein scandal, and at the core we need to remember those women who were abused. It's whether or not Andy did criminal wrongdoing, be it leaking official government documents to Epstein, or indeed obviously he's faced allegations of sexual misconduct. And also just a constitutional, I don't know if it's quite a constitutional crisis, but basically where you're removing someone from the line of succession. And remember, you know, when you have scandals like this rock the royal family, it tarnishes the institution of the monarchy, and it kind of paves the way for people who say, that's it, we've outgrown it, we should ditch it now, for then their kind of voices to grow louder. So it has broader repercussions than just the details of this one case.
Most definitely. Well, look, we've had a long conversation about Andrew, safeguarding, all the rest of it. I would say the majority of you have no sympathy for Andrew, and you're furious with the position that he's put the family in, not mainly, predominantly, his poor judgment of being friends with Epstein, which is at the root of all of this. What about the politics of this for the King? Because this is a family issue.
Yeah.
But it's also a political issue for him too, because he is a public figure and his handling of this is absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing, the hardest tightrope to walk, really, in the royal family, where you both are actual family, just like we would have brothers, sisters, cousins, but also you're a public institution, and you have to, your service is to the public. I think the King's dealt with this really well so far. He put out that statement after Andrew's arrest in which he says law must be able to take its course. Sources in the palace yesterday letting it be known that if Parliament wants to remove Andrew from the line of succession, they can go right ahead. The King would have no qualms, would not stand in the way of that. And I think Charles so far has done well in making it clear that he thinks the victims need to get justice. He won't stand in the way of any police investigation. He's not kind of defending his brother as his brother, and very mindful that his public statements are about him as the King rather than anything he might feel privately about Charles the brother.
I thought the language of the statement was good, but why not address the nation on camera?
Well, that's quite an interesting question, really. I mean, the royal family just don't do that, right? But this whole scandal has raised those questions. Do they need to modernise more? Do they need to be more transparent? Do they need to give more interviews? Or is he right to kind of step back and just let the authorities investigate at the moment? I think the likelihood of Charles addressing it on camera are very low at the moment. And certainly, look, certainly there's probably little he can say beyond that statement, because police investigation is live. People will ask him various things, and all he'll say, I suspect, is, well, we need to let the police do that investigation.
Well, we're going to get onto the government in just a moment. Let's finish with a text from Dan in Kent, who says, "Good morning, Mark. You're basing Andrew's emotions on one photograph. I don't believe Andrew is on suicide watch because he's too arrogant to have those feelings. But like your caller Carl said, being bumped off is a big possibility." Karen is not happy with my Dolan's dispatch today. She doesn't agree, which is why I'm determined to put her on the radio and on the telly. Take it away, Karen.
Hi, Mark. I disagree with you about Andrew. He deserves all he's get. I don't care how haunted he looks. What about the girls and the children that were trafficked? How haunted are they? The girls and the boys that were abused, how haunted are they? I mean, this man comes from privileged position, and you feel sorry for him? I don't care how dark his place gets, because some of those children never left that place. I'm getting sick and tired of hearing about Andrew. Look over here, but don't look over there. This is a distraction, and I'm sick of it.
It's about the royal protection officers as well, and Andrew is out of line. Front page of the Sun today: shamed royal to be axed from succession. Number 10 set to block his path to the throne. Not that he would necessarily, of course, be the king. That would be very, very unlikely. And Charles will not object to the historic move, apparently. The paper says that the disgraced Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor last night faced the historic humiliation being forcibly removed from the royal line of succession. Well, Alex Larman is an author, historian, literary editor of The Spectator World. Alex, good to have you on the programme. What do you make of these moves?
Morning, Peter. Well, it's very interesting because we are in uncharted territory here. And obviously, one of the things that we can see very clearly is that the king is under an awful lot of pressure. So I don't see at the moment that he's going to be saying no to very much, because obviously one of the big questions that everybody has is, what did the royal family know about Andrew's activities? How far does the rot go? And to what extent are they in any sense implicated in any of what's happening? So I don't think the king's going to be saying no to very much right now.
It's interesting with Elizabeth II as well. I've been talking about this for the last couple of days because Charles, Elizabeth II, they, of course, and she's not here, of course, to answer for herself anymore, revered former queen. But, of course, there'll be many people who will ask questions about what she knew. When did she turn a blind eye? Were there people around her protecting her from Andrew? How much did she know? How much did Charles know? All those questions have to be answered, don't they?
Of course they do. And I think that the main question a lot of people are going to have, which to be fair, I had even at the time, is why did the Queen give Andrew £12 million to pay off Virginia Giuffre? Because that is something which was done in order to stop Andrew appearing as a witness in a civil trial in the United States. And there is something very dubious about it, because Andrew kept protesting his innocence, as he does to this day. And you think, well, if you're innocent, why would your mother give you £12 million to pay off your accuser? And I think that was the moment in which a lot of people thought, right, there's something here, there's something very dubious here. And while it's also very interesting to remember that the crimes Andrew is accused of are not the sexual crimes that have been much speculated about, it's also the case that there is a real sense that the royal family did know something was going on, and that they did know that Andrew had been behaving in this way for a considerable amount of time. So what we are now seeing are the chickens coming home to roost.
So there are some people, Alex, who are saying that actually this is the royal family acting proactively, they're doing the right thing, they're helping the police, etc. And then many others, and I think I probably fall into this camp as well, who say, well, it's about time. You know, just because someone then says, right, we're going to cooperate with the police. If there was wrongdoing previously, and we'll talk about royal protection officers in a second, I do wonder why that was kept from the police. Of course, to protect the firm, as it were, but if that did happen, well, things need to happen and sanctions need to be taken.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, what I find fascinating is that Andrew is the first member of the royal family to have been arrested since Charles I. And don't tell me that over the hundreds of years between the restoration of monarchy in 1660 and now, that no member of the royal family committed a crime that would have probably deserved that they'd been arrested. And what you can see is it's a mixture of cover-up. It's a mixture of the fact that the royal family have always kept themselves to themselves and remained above the law. And we are now seeing for the first time...
It should be said just within that context that although it's a much less serious allegation, of course, Princess Anne was convicted, and when she had a dangerous dog, when her dog mauled somebody in Windsor Park and had to take training and pay a fine and so on. So she did appear in court, so she wasn't above the law there.
No, and I mean, obviously that was a fairly insignificant charge. That wasn't something that would have resulted in a prison sentence. And in fact, it's one of those things that there was no lasting damage either to her reputation or to that of the monarchy. Whereas the Andrew stuff, I mean, if he is found guilty of misconduct in public office, that carries a life sentence with it. That's a very serious charge. It's interesting because I've seen some speculation that this is like Al Capone being done for tax evasion and essentially a rather less important charge being levelled at him, but it isn't a less important charge. It's an absolutely massive charge, and in fact, in some respects, it might even be bigger because you are talking about the idea of he was a trade envoy. This is something that both the government and the royal family were complicit in. It's a sense that Andrew was essentially given this very diplomatically sensitive role in order to, I think it's now quite obvious, keep him out of trouble. But unfortunately, it kept him very much in trouble. And we're going to see the fallout of that over the coming days, weeks and months.
What do you make of the Mandelson aspect of this? It should be said that those searches of Royal Lodge are apparently going to continue until at least Monday, and that's going on as we speak. Because Peter Mandelson is now in the frame as someone who is pushing Andrew to be made the trade envoy. And when you bring all that together with the Epstein and the connections that both Mandelson and Andrew had to Epstein, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if I was Peter Mandelson, I would expect to be arrested very soon. I mean, I think it seems extraordinary.
I think that's highly likely.
Yeah, I think it seems extraordinary that Andrew would be arrested and Mandelson wouldn't be arrested, because it sounds as if they've done very similar things, judging by the Epstein files that have emerged into the public domain.
Just to be absolutely clear, just keep us both on the right side. Both men deny any wrongdoing.
Of course. And it's also very interesting that, I mean, Epstein really is a cancer on society. You can see that even years after his death, he has poisoned so many institutions and so many people. And it comes back to the fact that ultimately you can see that he offered people his corruption, and this corruption has spread into politics and into the royal family. And you can see the fact that Mandelson and Andrew were clearly friends of Epstein's. We see the intimacy of those emails. And so we can see the way in which they were complicit within his activities.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Let's talk about those protection officers, because one of them, now this is someone who has been convicted of fraud previously, but he was a royal protection officer a couple of decades ago. This is a while ago. But he is alleging that Buckingham Palace says he's been told to keep quiet by the Metropolitan Police. This is Paul Page, who said that the police were not allowed to record the names of Andrew's female guests on official logs, which in itself would be a security risk, certainly. And there have been all sorts of questions about, you know, lots of people who live in royal palaces, servants, for example, bringing people in, you know, whether it's paramours or whoever. Are they properly are they in official logs? Are they properly, you know, you need to know who's coming and going from a royal palace. It's meant to be a very secure institution. I remember there's one occasion I was invited to a thing at St James's Palace. I mean, I had to show my passport and all the rest of it, and rightly so. But this policeman says that former policeman says he was not allowed to record the names of Andrew's female guests, receiving a warning letter reminding him of his obligations of confidentiality and respect for the privacy of those who are protected. We know now that, of course, it would be easy. It's not about people coming forward. It's about the fact that, as one of our texters said earlier on, actually, Mary in County Down, said that all of these officers, anybody who was within touching distance of Andrew, over the course of this should be interviewed, and should be questioned about this, Alex.
Right, 100%. But what's quite clear is that there have been some very, very stringent NDAs in place, and that these NDAs...
Non-disclosure agreements, yeah.
Non-disclosure agreements. And these obviously would be encompassing everyone from protection officers to private secretaries, because it has been suggested by actually this issue, the new issue of Private Eye, that Andrew and his people around him have been disposing of quite large numbers of sensitive documents. The question is, will these documents have been disposed of in time before the police arrived?
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't know if this is true or not, but we certainly do know that what is going to make all the difference is if the non-disclosure agreements that have been signed by various members of not just Andrew's staff, but the royal household generally, are going to hold. Because I don't know what the legal position is, but I've always assumed, as with the Harvey Weinstein case a few years ago, that as soon as you are charged with committing a crime, then NDAs no longer apply.
I think that's true. I'm not a legal expert, but I know that has happened in the past, where people have been released from those non-disclosure agreements. Yeah.
And so what I would assume is there's going to be an awful lot of people who literally know where the bodies are buried, who've been unable to say anything because of these very stringent NDAs. And if they start coming out and talking not just about Andrew, but about the wider royal household, the monarchy is going to face an existential problem like it has never faced before. I mean, people compare this to the abdication crisis of 1936. This is so much worse and so much more damaging.
The royal family's good name is being abused, whistleblower told the palace. And here is the devastating headline. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother Andrew's secret deals. Now, this has major implications. King Charles was warned as long ago as 2019 that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's business associations. In a bombshell email, a whistleblower told the palace that the former Duke had secret financial links to controversial millionaire financier David Rowland, who was abusing his royal links. Messages seen by the Mail on Sunday also appear to show that Andrew, who was sensationally arrested on Thursday over suspicions of misconduct in public office, allowed Mr. Rowland to effectively join in with his official duties. Well, the real killer headline is email proves Charles was warned about Andrew. Let's have a look at the implications of this in the company of Rupert Bell, who is Talk's royal correspondent. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
What a piece of news to wake up to.
Yeah, well, this was always likely to be where it could be heading because there is still so many questions to be answered with the king, because obviously, how much may have he known even about the Virginia Giuffre payment and what was involved there? And have they at any stage been sort of shielding and protecting his younger brother? And these emails just, while he's still innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. It's the way that this drip feed of sort of allegations are sort of tarnishing and continuing to tarnish the reputation of the royal family. Andrew is dragging them down by his various associations with people that are causing problems. And that is why it led, obviously, to the scenes we saw on Thursday morning with him being driven away to a police station in Norfolk. And we are not going to see the end of this. This will continue. And once it gets to a court of law, then again, further revelations, I'm sure, as people make their defense or the prosecution. So it's all going to be very uncomfortable reading for all members of the royal family. And obviously, it most notably for the king, because really, how much did he know? If back in 2019, he knew that Andrew was potentially abusing his position and passing on information, which is part of the allegations that the police are investigating, then this is a further damaging look for the royal family. It can't be good.
Well, that's right. And following a lot of feedback from my viewers and listeners, Rupert, I've focused a little less on Andrew today because there are many problems facing the country. And one of the reasons why editorially I can justify that is because it's quite clear that as a brand, Andrew is over. Notwithstanding these serious criminal allegations that face him, which he denies, he's a busted flush. Andrew is over. The issue we've got here in regard to this exclusive from the Mail on Sunday is collateral damage to the king.
Yeah, and to the royal family as a whole. And that is where this whole situation is leading. You're right, Andrew is toast, burnt toast. And as a result, and Sarah Ferguson, we keep reading about what she's been getting up to and, what's going on. So that brand is well and truly a busted flush. Right, now the royal family are trying to make sure they're not being dragged into the situation. And yet, it's going to be very hard for them, and particularly for the king. And obviously, when the late Queen was alive, she was, deemed to be often protecting her son, trying to make sure that he, still seemed to be behaving within the sort of bounds of respectability. But, when you've got these payments of $12 million going out, with actually most people say, why? And then you see these emails, and there were warnings throughout Andrew's time as trade envoy, and people saying that he was potentially abusing his position. So the royal family know that at the moment Andrew is eating away by his actions at the credibility of the royal family. And this is where it becomes a constitutional issue. And for the king, in his mid-70s, as we've said before, battling his own health issues, this is a big strain on him, because he'll be waking up, seeing these headlines and thinking, here we go again.
And if Charles turned a blind eye to what was happening in 2019, would you put that down to naivety, incompetence, or misguided loyalty to his younger brother?
I suppose at once, the last of those you'd probably feel, because it's a family situation. If you take out the overall situation, yes, he's in the royal family, but he's still his younger brother. Now, that is always something, families do stick together, and the royal family have this would always try to be seen to sticking together. But it feels like this is misguided loyalty if he didn't get a grip of it. We don't know the full details of these emails and absolutely what may or may not have been said at the time. Bearing in mind, in 2019, he was stripped of being in public life. And perhaps if you look at what was happening then, probably the king might have said, well, you're off into exile as it is now in 2019. That's the end of it. We knew, and that's perhaps what we did at the time. But this is the problem. They thought it may go away then, but it hasn't. It's just got worse and worse. And with the release of all these Epstein files, it has led to the scenes that we saw on Thursday morning. So I think the royal family thought they were dealing with it and maybe believed what Andrew may have said to them. I don't know what conversations took place. And they said, OK, we draw a line in the sand here. But the reason I think that we saw him being stripped of his title as prince and various other, the Duke of York at the time, was because in the end, the king lost patience and said, I don't know where this is going to end. I've got to take another step further. Well, the next step further will be to lose his place in the order of succession, which has to go through Parliament, for which he is 8th in line to the throne.
And it's therefore, following this rather devastating exclusive on the part of the Mail on Sunday and their excellent political journalist Glenn Owen and our own international editor Isabel Oakeshott, who's going to join me at 8:05 in just a few minutes' time. With this new headline, email proves Charles was warned about Andrew's secret deals. It's now not inconceivable, Rupert, that the king may fall.
Well, I think that's
not
a
tomorrow,
hard one.
Not next week, not next month, but if there's a sufficient argument that can be put together that the king knew what Andrew was up to, it becomes untenable, doesn't it?
I think you have to wait to the court of law. At the moment, you can't just by association, guilt by association. That is what you're sort of implying there.
Right.
Is it? Yeah, and you can't do that. You have to prove things in a court of law. Now, if Andrew is found to have done what it maybe is alleged, then, and is found guilty, and then through the court of law, it comes out that maybe there was some protection of Andrew going on, then yes. But until that stage, you can't do everything.
But
just
even politically, it would be difficult for the king, wouldn't it? In these modern times, Rupert, where the CEO always has to step down, even if it's a junior that made the mistake, if Andrew is convicted and Charles knew anything, it's harder for him to stay king.
It is hard, and it will be hard, because the court of public opinion will be very much against him, and that will be heartbreaking for him. But if they have protected Andrew, because it comes out in wherever, then it will put pressure on the king. But at the moment, we mustn't get ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
We keep being surprised by all these revelations.
Wise words. Rupert, always a highlight to have you on. We'll get to that shortly, but another massive story. A developing breaking story at 8:06. Mail on Sunday exclusive. The royal family's good name is being abused. Whistleblower tells the palace. And here is the killer headline. This is damning, folks. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. King Charles, says the Mail on Sunday, in a world exclusive, was told a long time ago, in fact, as long ago as 2019, that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's business associations. The paper have revealed that in a bombshell email, a whistleblower told the palace that the former Duke had secret financial links to controversial millionaire financier David Rowland, who was abusing his royal links. Messages seen by the Mail on Sunday also appear to show that Andrew, who was sensationally arrested on Thursday over suspicions of misconduct in public office, allowed Mr. Rowland to effectively join in with his official duties. Well, the headline, folks, is that King Charles, according to this world exclusive, knew about Andrew's activities. Could this have implications for his position as the monarch of this country? Isabel Oakeshott is the co-author of this world exclusive. She joins us now. Good morning, Isabel.
Good morning, Mark. Well, I feel that this is the direction that this whole sorry saga is heading. I think the questions now are really, what did the most senior members of the royal family, obviously the buck ultimately stopping with the king now, know about Andrew's behaviour? When did they find out about it? And what did they actually do about it? And what my exclusive in today's Mail on Sunday reveals is that the king was warned that Andrew was basically enmeshed with some pretty questionable characters as he sought to fund his lavish lifestyle. For many years, there were questions over how on earth Andrew was actually paying for things, because he was clearly living a very fancy lifestyle, private jets, fancy hotels, traveling all over the world. Well, some years ago, I was able to answer that question through a cache of emails that I received between Andrew himself and two prominent businessmen known as the Rowlands, who he was working with. I was able to reveal how Andrew was making his money. And the answer to that was that he was acting as a door opener for the Rowlands, who had a private bank and business dealings all over the world in some extremely shady places. Now, crucially, the Rowlands weren't breaking any laws. They were being pretty smart, actually. This arrangement worked brilliantly for them because they looked after Andrew, and in turn, Andrew, who was able to go all around the world in his capacity as the UK's trade envoy, Andrew had access to people that the rest of us can only dream of having access to. He was in and out of royal palaces all over the world, in and out of diplomatic residences, able to access chairmen and CEOs of the world's biggest companies. And what he did is allow the Rowlands to come along with him on many occasions. And that is how he was making his money. And what I've revealed today is that the king was told about this arrangement, and he was warned about the type of people and regimes that the Rowlands were doing business with. And once again, we're not saying that the Rowlands were doing anything illegal, but they were making some interesting judgments about the type of people that they wanted to act as bankers for and the type of countries that they were prepared to engage with. So I'm talking hostile regimes, I'm talking African states were of interest to them, the kind of places that you and I, Mark, would say, those have trouble written all over them.
Most definitely. And notwithstanding the serious criminal allegations, Isabel, that face Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, which he denies, it's priced in that Andrew is a man of poor judgment. It's priced in that Andrew is, to a degree, a wrong-un who's brought disrepute on the royal family. The guy's toast. He's a busted flush. The problem here, and what's so devastating in regard to your world exclusive, is that this implicates the king. It's not impossible in the months ahead that the king's position becomes untenable.
So, and I think that there's an institutional problem here. They knew how Andrew was behaving and they just sort of hoped it would go away. And I was speaking to someone this morning who likened this scandal to the MP's expenses scandal. And I actually thought that was quite an interesting analogy. And what this person said is somebody who is very well connected with Andrew and Sarah, was that actually the way that the royals, and it's not just Andrew, have behaved over a very long periods of time is one of entitlement and quite regularly taking things from other rich people, whether that's free holidays, whether that's the use of yachts, the use of helicopters, the use of private planes. All of that has been just the way they operate and have done, well, frankly, probably for centuries, but in any case, certainly for decades. And they haven't felt that they need to be accountable for that. And that is exactly how it was with MPs before the MPs' expenses scandal blew up. And I think that is why this now goes wider. This is about what is this royal family for? How do they account for their lifestyles? And what are we, the taxpayer, prepared to put up with? Is there now going to be more scrutiny on the way they're living and the kind of perks that they have taken for granted that go with the job.
Most definitely. And if it can be proven that Charles was aware of Andrew's secret deals, well, it's tantamount to the mother of all cover-ups.
So, crucially, the King's people are not denying that this email was received. It went to the Queen's lawyers. It was CC'd to a number of people who would have had a duty. I think they would have been duty bound to alert the King himself. Interestingly, the sender tried to use an email format for the King, which he knew worked for Andrew. It was a variation of Andrew's private email address. And apparently the King doesn't use email and didn't then as the Prince of Wales. But the sender was clever and CC'd a couple of quite important people and got their email right. And those people ought to have alerted the then Prince of Wales, the future King, to the content of that message. So I think the King was told about this, and I think he just thought, well, this is just some disgruntled person who's in a financial dispute with the Rowlands. That was the backdrop to it. What's this got to do with me? And probably did nothing about it. Now, it's possible the palace will come out and say, well, you know what, actually, the King did take this seriously and he did do something about it. But it's not really their modus operandi, is it? And they just sort of hope by being quiet, hopefully it'll go away.
Well, I think this extraordinary piece of journalism moves the dial in this conversation. And there's a sword of Damocles hanging over the boss now, in my humble opinion, Isabel. Not today, not tomorrow, not next week, but in time. And I've got to tell you that royal expert after royal expert rubbished my suggestions this week that Charles is under pressure. And I think that your world exclusive absolutely puts him under pressure. And I'll tell you for why. He was just the Prince of Wales when that email that you've exposed may well have gone to him, 2019, just the Prince of Wales. So he wasn't the boss. Fair enough. Similarly, in 2020, when that cheque reportedly for 12 million quid in an out-of-court settlement with Virginia Giuffre was signed, again, he was the Prince of Wales, not the boss. But he takes to the throne in that context with the background of all of that information, at which point Andrew remains the Duke of York. Andrew remains a member of the Order of the Royal Garter. Andrew remains effectively an active member of the royal family, attending church services, and remains a resident of the Royal Lodge on the Windsor estate. And that is the political problem for Charles.
Do you know, I think Charles was probably so preoccupied with what for him was the more immediate crisis, which was the behaviour of his younger son. There's only so many massive family nightmares anyone can deal with at any one time. I think a lot of people will sympathise. If you've got several problem people in your family, you're going to try and deal with the first and worst most. And Andrew's problems and behaviour had been well known in a broader sense for a long time. And I suspect the future King, was just fully immersed in dealing with all the other headaches, the Meghan and Harry headache that went on and is still not resolved. And then, of course, now he's got his health problems. I mean, I think a lot of people will actually feel sorry for the King. So counter to what we're saying, yes, I think he's under pressure. But an awful lot of voters in our country will be like, you know what, my God, he's had an awful time. He's got cancer. His youngest son is a complete wastrel. It's just been an ongoing nightmare. And his younger brother is just bringing everything down even further. And there's how much can one man take? That's the thing.
Do you feel sorry for the King because you are the fearless journalist, Isabel, that has exposed emails that potentially link Charles to this scandal, or at least demonstrate that this scandal was likely on the King's radar? Do you feel sorry for him?
I do a bit, and I think that this is combined with the Harry disaster, I think this is such a nightmare for the royal family, that really only turning a new page with William and Kate as our monarchs.
Bingo. All roads lead to William, don't they?
They do. I mean, I have to
This
say,
is a guy that can't stand his Uncle Andrew and wanted him chucked out of the firm in 2020.
I also think Catherine, she just doesn't put a foot wrong, you know, and I think to give our nation the kind of restart it needs on so many levels, having that younger generation now take over would make sense. But, you know, Charles is not going to do that voluntarily, no chance. And he will follow the example of his mother. He will feel duty bound to follow the example of his late mother, who, as we all know, kept going till her very dying hour. And I think that he will, there's just no way that he will step aside. But if I were to be advising them, I would actually, you know what, find a moment, not now, but find a moment for health reasons when you say, actually, it's time now to pass this down to my son.
Indeed. It is an extraordinary piece of journalism. If you're just joining us, breaking news at 8:19. Email proves Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. This is a world exclusive in the Mail on Sunday from Isabel Oakeshott, international editor, and Glenn Owen. Isabel, this is a developing story. What do you think the legacy of this scoop is going to be?
I think that for the next few days, this is where the story will turn, and the pressure will be on Charles, the pressure will be on his people to explain what he has done over the years without having to be forced to do it. You know, have there been conversations behind the scenes? If I were advising the king, I would say, look, let's get some stuff out there about what you have proactively been doing over the years. Andrew's a dead duck, as you said, so it's no harm for the palace to let it be known that the king, you know, perhaps begged Andrew to stop doing certain things and Andrew simply wouldn't listen. There's ways of spinning this, and spin it they must.
Isabel, you've jumped in a cab to join us on Talk. We're very grateful for your time and sharing this massive scoop. I mean, it really is. It's story of the century. Mail on Sunday. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals.
Well, it has not been a great week for the royal family. That's an understatement of the century. Someone who knows a lot about this is Di Davies. He's the operational commander of the SO4 Royalty Protection Command. Now, Di, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Always nice to be with you.
Well, look, I mean, we're in some very sort of unprecedented, uncharted waters here with the royal family. Obviously, you know, Andrew was arrested just last Thursday. He was then released, but we don't know, you know, what's actually going to happen to him. A lot of other avenues are being searched at the moment. They're also calling into question people like royal protection officers who worked with him for years. What did they know? Who knew what and when? In your view, how seriously should we be taking this situation?
It's unprecedented in my long years on this earth, and as a historian now, it's unprecedented going back to the time of Charles I. But, you know, this is really serious. It's serious because of who are involved, who knew. As I've said numerous times, but so-called experts are coming forward now to say, surprise, surprise, this involves 4 government departments. Well, I've been saying that for a year. In fact, in more, there's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, there's the Trade, there's the Metropolitan Police, there are other police forces, and they are palace and diplomats themselves. Where does it stop? The tentacles are so far-reaching that it is constitutionally really for those who care about such a thing.
I know, and I just feel like the lack of accountability has just been astounding. I mean, you've always been very strong about making sure that the focus is on the victims. They seem to have been lost in all of this, and especially with his arrest on Thursday, because it had nothing to do with the alleged victims. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that they are just acting because there is some sort of box-ticking exercise to be done here? With the recent release of the files, we can see that he might have given very sensitive information across to Epstein, as well as sort of collusions with China, Singapore, and other sort of hostile-ish states. Why do you think the victims have been lost in this entire conundrum?
It's a very good question, and it's one I've been raising since that infamous interview that he did with Emily. And I went on Newsnight, as you probably know, and called into question then Why weren't the Metropolitan Police investigating 2 British citizens for a crime that was alleged to have been committed in the United Kingdom and then further committed in the Virgin Islands and in New York by 2 British citizens? They say at the time they didn't feel they had the jurisdiction. Well, I disagreed then and I disagree now. And if it wasn't for the victims making the hoo-ha, and nobody believed Virginia Giuffre at the time, if you recall, she was called everything under the sun. Now we know, in my opinion, and I've always felt that she was telling the truth. But it's thanks to those victims, many hundreds of them in the United States, that largely now we are looking, and I've been alleging this for a long time, why don't anyone in government investigate his finances, who he was dealing with, the kind of people that he was taking on these trips with him? So these are important, and I'm delighted at long last, after years of Panorama and others trying to get this to the fore, but it goes back nearly 20 years or more, and successive governments have chosen to ignore it. And there are questions for prime ministers, there are questions for foreign secretaries, and certainly there are questions, sadly, as we're learning today's newspapers, for the royal family themselves. What did they know? When did they know? And did they have any kind of internal inquiry? And if they did, can we see that, please? And why has it now taken so long for all of this to come out? I'm afraid they can't avoid responsibility.
No, absolutely not. I mean, when you hear about, certain newspapers alleging that the king had a hand in paying off Virginia Giuffre, there was some sort of loan there that Prince Philip, the Queen, and the king had a hand in. When you hear about all that, you do think, how much did he know? And you were right to bang the drum after the Mateless interview, because I am astounded now with all that we know, that Virginia's testimony was basically just tossed to the side and almost just sort of swept under the carpet. Would you say that there has been a cover-up?
Well, I've called it today and yesterday, a number of interviews, a conspiracy of silence. It's now the job for the police, and I'm fearful about, I hope, the current Metropolitan Police will take it seriously. If not, and if they don't, then perhaps we'll need to go to the Independent Office of Police Conduct. Because it can't go on where they continually say when there's anything related to the royals, there's nothing to see here. An example of that is the clear emails showing that Andrew and Epstein colluded, allegedly, along with press officers and others, allegedly a police officer, no evidence that he did or she did anything. But there is evidence, and there's nothing to see here. I always say, if you don't follow the audit trail, if you don't investigate, the CPS, the Crown Prosecution, can't advise you. But it's for the police to investigate. And I've been crying out for this for such a long time, ever since the Burrell and the various allegations that emanated from that trial. And every time something untoward is alleged against the royals, for some reason, nobody wants to investigate it. And until recently, and shame on them, the politicians haven't raised it. Now they're all going this, that, and the other. But where were they? And I said that about the royals. Where were you all these years ago? You knew about this back years ago. What did you do? Who did you advise? Who advised you? Who did you ask to investigate?
It's
coming out.
certainly too little too late.
Well, unfortunately, the most people in this country, including me, want a form of monarchy. But they've got to be honest. And if it's proven that they're not honest and they've tried to take us for fools, then sadly, they'll have to take the consequence like everyone else in this sorry saga. It just stinks.
You're right in the Paul Burrell situation where he seemed to have basically gotten off because he called in the Queen as his witness, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think something like that would happen with Andrew and he would eventually just be able to get off scot-free as he has seemingly his entire life?
Well, it's for others to decide that. Constitutionally clear, the King apparently is above any reproach or giving evidence in his own court. And I understand that point of view. But let's cut back also. It's not just Andrew, it's his ex-wife, possibly the children. What did they know? Where and how did they get these huge, huge amounts of money, so-called birthday presents or wedding presents? Where have the authorities been? I mean, it's been voiced by the Mail on Sunday and numerous other newspapers for years, yet nobody seems to have either had the inclination or the courage to take it on. That's merely what I'm saying. If you and I avoided our tax, if you and I went all over the world and allegedly had millions paid into various accounts offshore, the taxman would be knocking on our door. Where have they been?
Completely does seem like that because, you know, when very serious allegations against Andrew, many would receive sort of their door knocked down. It seems like he's just received a very light sort of knock on the door for what he's been doing. Now, just to bring it into the protection officers, the police are urging them to come forward with what they've seen or what they saw. What kind of information would they have realistically witnessed? I mean, you've been very close to all that action. Obviously, they are there with them in very close quarters for most of their lives. So would they have seen things that could help with the investigation?
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? Every one of those palaces that Epstein had, the various homes, 5 or 6 different homes, police officers would have gone with him. They could not fail, apparently, because I haven't been there, to see the lewd pictures, the obscene, pornographic pictures, the various sexual implements, and they must have noticed how young some of the females and girls were. It beggars belief that they didn't see anything untoward. It beggars belief they didn't report that. But furthermore, it beggars belief back when, after he was convicted, didn't anyone do a due diligence on him? Didn't anybody do due diligence on those who are traveling with him? It's alleged there are a number of business people and sons of the business people who traveled with him. Didn't anybody in the diplomatic service, didn't anybody in the police do due diligence normally? Before you go anywhere, you check everything and everybody out. That's the whole point of protection. You do the preparation. So apparently, seemingly, for many, many years, this ex-prince was allowed to travel, see some very dodgy dictators, people in Kazakhstan and various other people, allowed to do financial and try and do financial in Saudi, where he was rude, allegedly, to the diplomats. Didn't anybody report this? I mean, it's a scandal of the highest order. And lastly, where's our security services? Didn't they have a handle on who he was meeting with? Didn't that come back to prime ministers and foreign secretaries? And if so, what did they do about it? And yet he's been allowed to fester. He's been allowed to mix with really bad people, and the government, and they have to be back to the government, and the palace have allowed it, apparently, without doing anything.
You're completely right. And it seems like national security was at risk many different times during these instances where people allegedly turned a blind eye within the palace. Because, I mean, even one article that I was reading about his special code name that he would use, Mrs. Windsor, when he was taking people in and out of the various residences, is really concerning, especially hearing that Russian nationals, potential Romanian, these are all obviously alleged at the moment, but Romanian young girls were brought in. Who knows? They could have been assets of the Russian government, apparently, because of how they had to keep it under lock and key and, you know, keep it very discreet. They didn't really do security checks on these women. I mean, how irresponsible can this man be to have done this? But, I mean, are there even mechanisms in place for people to whistleblow in this situation?
Well, I hope so, and I hope that those on the fringes may be allowed some discretion and anonymity, I would hope. But they have to be questioned, and private secretaries have to be questioned. Senior palace officials have to be investigated. And if you know, as you probably know, the Hillsborough law is coming out. I don't think it's on the statute yet, where public officials, police officers, have to tell the truth. And if they're found not to, there are grave consequences. This is just the start. But it seems extraordinary to me now that we have 10 different police forces actually looking at the trafficking, which, going back to the victims, is clearly very important. So there are two key areas. There's the issue regarding the victims, and hopefully more information will come out as to the truth of those men in America who clearly were part of this ring, sexual ring, but also looking again at the people who traveled with him, who were party to the people like Rowlands and his son, who now named in the Mail on Sunday, and in fairness to the Mail on Sunday, they named them years and years ago. years ago, and allegedly that information was passed on to the Prince of Wales as he was then. So I ask again, where is the audit trail? Follow the audit trail, and as with any corrupt individual, the audit trail should be followed along the money trail. And as an investigator now, many years, 50 plus years, at home and abroad, I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated that we have all these experts all coming out now. Where have they been?
I want to move this on to the king when we talk about where have people been in this. Now, this will tarnish the king's legacy if he doesn't tread carefully in the next couple of months. I already think that, as you've said, they were way too slow to act on this. But, I mean, he is the king's brother. At what point does this stop being Andrew's scandal and start becoming a big problem for the crown itself? Do you think the king may have to step aside, potentially?
Well, as I said, we are in uncharted waters, and really it depends what will come out. Every day, virtually now, new information is coming out, and the media and others are probing this in every shape and form. There must be some quaking in their boots, I think. Whether the king is remains to be seen. I feel sorry because he's not very well, doesn't look very well, and I don't think he needs this, but he needs it like a hole in the head, really. So in one sense, as a human, I'm feeling sorry for him, but equally so, he and those around him can't hide from telling the truth. And for once, perhaps, if everybody just got a clean sheet and said, yeah, we did it, but we didn't want to wash because of various reasons, but we took the actions we have, and explain it, perhaps then we can perhaps look at it more favorably. At the moment, as I've said, there appears to have been a complete conspiracy by so many of silence for so many years. It can't go on, and if it does go on, and it's shown that he and any other member of the royal family was aiding and abetting this by their silence, sadly, they would have to take the consequences.
Is it credible that the king would be completely unaware of what had happened? I mean, since you've worked in kind of all these spheres and you know what type of briefings go on, surely he must have known some of Andrew's sort of grievances or what Andrew was doing behind the scenes.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? Because like his late mother, she was highly briefed on a daily basis by anything that affected the royal family. So what's the point of their press officers, the reams of people that fundamentally we pay for, eventually in one shape or another? What's the point of them if they don't brief the king and those at senior level? So there are huge questions to ask for them going back 20 plus years, more, 25 years.
Completely. And just to finish off with, because my goodness, I mean, this is really, really interesting to hear almost firm evidence that there has been some sort of cover up here. Of course, this is all alleged at this point.
Well,
but
it is alleged, and I'm just saying it to you as somebody, hopefully, who has a degree of common sense, but a degree of knowledge as an investigator. That's all I'm saying. It shouldn't be for me to call these things out. It should have been called out by people far more senior than I and knowledgeable. But unfortunately, at my age, if I don't speak out now because there's been so much silence, I feel yet again the victims will be let out. So let's have some truth. Let's have some honesty. And frankly, don't take us for fools, because we're not.
What's the single biggest unanswered question about the Andrew Epstein files that you think the public should know?
How was he allowed to get away with it for so long?
There's a maximum sentence for what Andrew was brought in for the other day of life imprisonment. Do you see that potentially happening? Do we see an Andrew behind bars in our lifetime?
Well, call me cynical. I doubt it.
Interesting. Well, Di Davies, thank you so much for speaking to us. That was a very, very interesting interview. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially on your Sunday, to have a conversation with me. That was Di Davies, Operational Commander of the SO14 Royalty Protection Command. I've never been great on titles. It's my weakest point.
A huge royal development courtesy of the Mail on Sunday. Email proves King Charles was warned about his brother's secret deals. King Charles was warned as long ago as 2019 that the royal family's name was being abused by Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's business associations, according to the Mail on Sunday. Let's get reaction now from a man who knows the workings of the royal family intimately well, the former royal butler, Grant Harold. Good morning, Grant.
Good morning.
Grant, I know you've got the highest regard for King Charles, and I have high regard for him as well. But this is a headache for our monarch, is it not?
Oh, completely. I mean, the fact that apparently these emails exist and kind of show that he knows about it. In one hand, of course, it shocks me like everyone else, but on the other hand, it doesn't, because I think with family members, and tell me if I'm wrong, Matt, I think with family members, we're aware if some of them have got skeletons or in their cupboard, or maybe things aren't quite, kind of right. It's families, you're aware of these kind of things. But again, as we've said the whole way along, innocent until proven guilty. And so the king would also be kind of taking that in mind, that back all those years ago, he maybe wouldn't want to kind of get ahead of himself. But as it's become more transparent that things aren't adding up, that's when we've seen him take these precautions by removing the titles, get them to move out of his home, and basically distance himself very much as things have escalated. So it's a bit of a kind of, I suppose, if you look back, several years ago, it wasn't quite like this.
Exactly,
so maybe,
right. I mean, the world has changed, Grant, hasn't it, since the 1950s and 60s, reverence towards the royal institutions. We now live in a culture which is, I suppose, more political, Grant, where the boss is accountable for the actions of someone under them. The boss, the CEO, on this occasion, being the king.
Absolutely. And as you said, in the 1950s and 40s, you would never question the monarchy. In fact, if you question the monarchy, you can find yourself in a bit of trouble. Even, dare I say, 20 years ago, when now it's changed. I mean, they are accountable, and we're all aware, Matt, that the monarchy popularity has certainly dropped since the death of the late Queen. The recent poll that's been done about Prince Andrew being removed from the line of succession, where a majority of people don't want him in the line of succession. There's a lot of strong feeling, can I say, against the monarchy at this moment in time. And the king will be aware of that. So these emails that have now come out today only adds to the weight where people are probably going to be questioning, the point of the monarchy, and and kind of starting to think of what's the alternatives, which is not what the king would be wanting to, people to be, he want people to be grateful and thinking how wonderful it is to have a royal family, not questioning, why we've got it and all the problems that come along with it.
What do we know of Charles's relationship with Andrew over the years, Grant? Do they get on, the two men? Before all of this scandal, do they have chemistry? Were they pals, or was there always a problem?
I mean, from my point of view, Mark, I didn't ever see a huge amount of Andrew.
Lucky you.
Completely honest, if I'm being completely honest, I only saw him a few times. Now, it doesn't mean to say that his brother, they didn't speak on the phone, or they didn't have, because I wasn't always there. That's, I can't say for certainty. But I think from my experiences, I'd said the king was certainly closer to his sister, Princess Anne. And also they live, where I live, they're actually I'm kind of between the two of them by a few miles. So they are, neighbours, and they are friends. I think with these brothers, and Edward as well, I wouldn't say they're not close. They just probably don't have as much contact as he would with his sister, say. But as far as Andrew went, I didn't really see, if that gives you an indication, I didn't really see much of him at all.
No, Charles and Anne seem to be similar in character, quite diligent, quite austere, very focused on the job, sensible people, maybe like their mother.
Absolutely. Their characters are very similar. I always thought that Princess Anne very much reminded me of her father, and the king, interestingly, probably a little bit more of his mother. But when it came down to, and even Edward, of his mother, but when it came to Andrew, I don't really know which character you could actually describe him as. He was always quite there's more and more coming out, isn't there? There's even private detectives and things kind of giving views and talking about him. And unfortunately, I think what is coming out, and I was aware of that even before I joined the royal household, that he was never hugely popular, if I can say that, certainly around the staff.
This must be difficult for you to see so many negative headlines around a family and an institution of which you're very fond and which you served for many years, Grant. Your book, which is a bestseller, is called The Royal Butler, My Remarkable Life of Royal Service. This is just painful to watch, isn't it?
It is, Mark. I've got a respect for the royal family. It was a childhood ambition to work for them. I idolised them. I really wanted to meet Queen Elizabeth. And as you know, these are all, if I can say, dreams that all came true. And when you work for them, you know, it'd be wrong of me to say that they're perfect. Nobody's perfect. You know, we all have flaws. Everybody's got flaws. We're human. We make mistakes. But not, you know, when I was there was nothing quite like this going on. So to kind of now witness what's happening at this present time is unbelievable. And the only thing I would say is I'm kind of glad that the Queen's not around to see, whether she knew or not, to see what's happening with public opinion and the kind of what's all taking place, and, you know, with Andrew getting arrested. I don't know if the Queen, I honestly don't know how the Queen would have coped with it.
No, it's unimaginable, particularly given that she was older and faced health battles. You really wouldn't want to have added that to her burden. You mentioned that you served as the royal butler at a happier time for the institution. What do you think your former colleagues are going through now as they serve the king, as they serve other members of the royal family within the household? What do you think life is like in the palace at the moment?
I think it's going to be quite, I think everyone's going to be on edge, to be completely truthful. And I'm wondering if the police with the investigation are going to be interviewing members of the household. And that's going to be interesting because, you know, without breaking confidence, I'm aware of what one or two of them has said to me over the years. And if they get interviewed, I'm wondering what will be said, you know. So I think and also there's going to be a lot of uneasiness about it. You know, it's now that, you know, thing where everyone's going to be thinking, am I going to be interviewed? Am I going to be questioned? And let's be realistic, some people will worry because, you know, there's certain people have been there for many, many years, and what they won't want to do is to jeopardise their jobs or cause any kind of upset, you know, for the family. But at the same time, you can guarantee the king will want to get to the bottom of this, and he'll probably be encouraging them, you know, if they get interviewed, to make sure that they tell the truth.
Overnight, the BAFTAs, Prince William, front page of The Sun, saying, "I'm not in a calm state." How can he be? Tom Tugendhat, the ex-security minister of the Tory government, is calling for his uncle, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, and in fact Mandelson, to be tried for treason. Tom Tugendhat will be on the show. Nigel Farage is on at 8, travelled to the Chagos Islands to sort of highlight the plight of the Chagossian people and was banned from entering the Chagos Islands, but you can indeed get here willy-nilly. And don't forget that police officer, this is an extraordinary story, defended a Christian preacher's freedom of speech to be able to stand in London in Whitechapel and talk about Christianity. A whole bunch of men, Muslim men, said, "Get out, this is a Muslim area," and this police officer literally said, no, freedom of speech is two-way. Morning, Pete.
High praise for that female police officer. Good on her, because she was very brave going out there confronting a group of men like that. Very brave. But let's put this bluntly. This now shows, right, that these people do not want to integrate, do they? This is a Muslim area. No, this is Britain, and that was London. The whole place is British.
There you go, 0344 499 1000. Right, we'll cross to the United States of America, because no Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show is complete without the First Lady of Royalness. Does that sound right? Kinsey Schofield, hello.
You know, I'll take that nickname over G-Spot any day.
There you go. I don't know what to say. Hello to the wife who's listening as she tunes in to see Kinsey talking about her G-Spot. Listen, can I just say, well, some sort of G-Spot. Can I just say, what a dreadful week for me to take the week off, honestly, for half term.
I knew you were on vacay, but I wanted to message you all week. I was like, how many times are you going to tell me I told you so?
I'm going to go further today. I want to put this out there to you straight away. We can talk about William last night at the BAFTAs. We can talk about Tom Tugendhat. It's an ongoing investigation for Andrew, and we have to bear that in mind. I notice or believe there is a change, Kins, amongst the British public. I am a self-styled monarchist. I make no apology. Everybody knows the old man worked for 40 years for the Queen Mother, but I sense a shift, and I fear that that shift will not be reversed unless one thing happens, which I didn't think I'd ever say, which is that the King might well have to step aside to allow William and Kate with a clean slate to start again, and I have the perfect out for him. He can use his illness, can't he?
I mean, there's no doubt that William and Catherine are untarnished, that they are sparkly, clean, new. There's hope associated with them, but If you are as much of a monarchist as I am, JK, you know that the crown is divinely ordained. Being king isn't about personal achievement. It's not a promotion you get based on good behavior. It's a sacred responsibility assigned by God, not by public opinion or by the choices of your little brother that no one can stand. Abdicating because of scandal would make it look like divine appointment depends on someone else's behavior, and it simply doesn't.
I completely get that, and I would have said that all my life. But the little brother, the problem is when you wake up every day to Andy still demanding that he's called a sir, orders to royal servants, he's got a chef and a valet. When you look, and you will know this from the United States of America, when you look at how this country is and the situation many people find themselves in, that unfairness tag that Charlie and I were talking about earlier just keeps reverberating. The thing for me is I know that King Charles, through every sinew of his being, believes in the royal institution. If it was put to him that the only way... Because, let's be honest, Kins, I haven't spoken to you about this. Are you telling me he and his mother didn't know the 12 million was for what it was for? Because he's implicated. We can dress it up how you want. I'm a royalist, but the people in this country are going, come on, mate, you don't give your brother 12 million quid for nothing.
No, he did say through, I think, the Telegraph that he did not have anything to do with that payout. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did, and I'm not taking the opposite view deliberately. I see something that I've believed in crumbling in front of my eyes, if I'm honest.
Well, let me ask you this. When Edward was partying with Nazis, why didn't we demand King George VI step down? I mean, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, his actions are his own actions. They do not reflect on King Charles. His judgment, his leadership are his character. I think blaming the king for his brother's misconduct confuses individual responsibility with family ties. Stepping down over someone else's scandal.
But what about what about what Isabel Oakeshott wrote yesterday in the Mail on Sunday? And if you're tuning in, we're not arguing, we're having a debate because it's really important. Isabel wrote that a whistleblower, and it's all over the papers here today, there was an email in 2019 that the royal family, King Charles and the Queen, were made fully aware of the reservations about him in terms of the trade envoy, giving away stuff, taking advantage in his behaviour, and it was swept under the carpet. So whilst I agree with you about the crown is ordained and another man's mistakes are not yours, the question here now is, what can he do to convince his subjects that he did enough? That's where we're at.
Well, when I initially saw that story, I was reminded that it happened in 2019, and here we are in 2026, and the king still does not have a cellular telephone. So you're telling me that we can guarantee with every fiber of our beings that someone sent an email to King Charles's attorney, and we know that Prince Charles at the time witnessed that email, digested that email. This is a man that still doesn't even have a flip phone. His own son complains about not being able to get a hold of him, and we're expected to believe that this one email was on his radar. I need to hear it from him, although he's not in a position because of the investigation to speak.
Well, now that's very interesting because that's sort of where I'm at, and we've come full circle. I want to hear from him. We all remember what happened with the Queen when Diana sadly died and she stayed in Balmoral to be with the boys, and that was perceived as wrong. Her subjects wanted to hear from her, and when she eventually came down to London and spoke, the whole thing changed. I understand as well as you do that it's a police investigation, but I'm just telling you what the people in this country are feeling, and they somehow want more from their king. Maybe it's not abdication, maybe it is addressing the nation. I don't know. Maybe he's in a terrible position, but I go back to 2019, whether he got that email or not, right? He apparently in 2003 warned the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown that it would not be a good idea for his brother to be a trade envoy. It will end in tears. And do you know who the business secretary was who championed it? This is brilliant, isn't it?
Peter Mandelson, our buddy,
bloody Mandelson, yeah.
Mr. Short Shorts, yeah, Mr. Tidy Whities himself. But to be honest, the king cannot, I mean, he's gone completely no contact with Andrew because, as you know, here in the States, you lived here for a while, it's the people verse when somebody is prosecuted. Over where you are, it's the king versus the defendant. Prosecutions are brought in the name of the crown, not an individual victim or the police. So as monarch, Charles cannot testify or be a witness in his own courts. You know, he's worried about what he says publicly because a prosecution could collapse based on that. So he's limited in how he's able to react.
Has anybody thought about the other thing? If you look back of Burrell, the self-styled, you know, Diana's favourite person who was accused and went to court for taking artefacts from memorabilia from her house after her death, and all he had to do in court was stand up and say, I told the Queen can't be called. Has anybody in the legal profession worked out that presumably there's a fear that Andrew, if this goes to court and it's an ongoing process, could he not just say, I told my brother at some point, and then that case would be in trouble, right?
It would, yeah. Let's hope that Andrew's defense team hasn't had that conversation yet, and that they don't watch Jeremy Kyle at the crack of dawn, because you just gave him a very good strategy. But yeah, I think that that's a serious concern. It's why the king has refused to talk to Harry throughout all of his court cases, because it could jeopardize the case.
It's amazing. On a serious note, bless you, I can tell how hard you've been working the voices, but I mean, you've been on it the whole time, haven't you? And it's just great to be back in the hot seat and talking to you. Where do you think it ends, Kins? Genuinely.
Well, I do think that Parliament might go as far as removing Andrew from the line of succession. It has to pass a new act of Parliament. It has to be approved across the Commonwealth realms, which I do think would be drama and time consuming, but then it can be signed into law. There's no shortcut, no royal decree, and no internal palace mechanism that could do this. This has to be the government. Andrew was stripped of HRH and his royal duties by the royal family. Titles can be altered by the king and Parliament, but succession rights require legislation. And I do think that it's what the UK wants to see. I think it would be a level of accountability that they would appreciate. And I think it would reflect well on the government as well as the monarchy, even though they don't necessarily have a say.
In the next 5 years, does King Charles, will he still be the king?
Oh my gosh. Well, let me get out my crystal ball, Jeremy Kyle. I think that you are right. If the king were to ever abdicate, he would give this some space, some distance, because he doesn't want to be stained with the Epstein scandal. Yeah. And if he stepped down, he would say it was regarding his health. He doesn't want his legacy to be attached to something so vile.
Last week on holiday, when all this Andrew thing, right, came out, I thought of two words. Andrew Loney. Morning, Andrew.
Good morning. Very nice to be back with you again.
Lovely to have you back. I have to say, and I want to start, when you wrote entitled, when you were making all these accusations about the Duke of York, the House of York, you told me 2 weeks ago I was threatened, I was abused, and I was laughed at. It would be fair to say, my friend, almost everything you've said has come to pass, hasn't it?
Yes, it's very gratifying to find that my sources were accurate. I mean, I knew they were. I did feel sometimes I was a bit of a lone voice, but it's very nice. A lot of people who are ostracizing me are now warming me, grabbing me by the hand. So that's great. And we've also got, I think, a bit more of a campaign for royal transparency now. Again, I felt I was a lone voice, but people now realize this is the only way they can survive.
Do you feel vindicated, Andrew?
Yeah, well, yes. I feel I loosened the earth a bit. I mean, I feel also we're getting justice for the victims, and I think we're holding to account some of the men who were responsible for these awful crimes.
I was watching it all sort of unfold, and we talked about, how we both felt that he would be arrested. It's an ongoing case, so we have to be very careful. Tom Tugendhat was talking about how he believes there might well be a reason or a decision to look at a treason probe for both Prince Andrew, as was Prince Andrew, and Mandelson. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's absolutely right. I mean, I've always said this is a national security scandal. Tim Shipman touched on this in his Spectator diary last week, using his contacts in Whitehall, the worry that Andrew's given away defence secrets. I've brandished an intelligence report on interviews that I got from American intelligence, only dated this year, showing the links with Russian intelligence. So yes, this is going a lot way to go, and I think the charges against Andrew will be much more serious than people realise.
Something that struck me over the weekend as a fervent royalist, but like you, desperate for transparency, was something that I wanted to put to you. I think that I read Dan Hodges in the Mail on Sunday, and he talked about how the British feeling amongst normal people seems to have shifted. We know all about the arguments in the past for a monarchy and a republic. I genuinely think it's so bad that the king might have to stand aside, and I genuinely have a way out for him, which is to say that his medical situation is the reason that he's doing that. We will all know it's for the good of the royal family, and they start with a clean slate with William and Kate. What do you make of that, pal?
Yes, I mean, a number of people have suggested that. I've suggested that myself. I think it may be the only way to clean up the stables and start afresh. I think the king is compromised by his association with Andrew. I think there has been a cover-up. I think he knows a lot more than he's saying. And nothing was done when it could have been done. We've had emails, for example, that have been leaked that show that he was warned about Andrew's association with people like David Rowlands. So I think in order to lance the boil, there may have to be some dramatic gesture, or else the whole thing will just carry on. So, yeah, I think we are moving towards that sort of position.
It's interesting. The guy brings me in the morning, said, I agree with that, but I can't see, Kinsey talked about it, you know, birthright, he's waited all those years. Would not, in your mind, the importance of sustaining the future of the British monarchy be more important to Charles than hanging on for a few years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have gotten to that last chance saloon. I mean, in some ways, his legacy will be defined by the way he deals with this. And maybe, you know, the best thing he can do is to fall on his sword to ensure this, that the continuation of the monarchy, because I agree. I think there would be huge public anger if it's found that he was involved in, for example, negotiations, the paying of the settlement. He was warned, along with the Queen, about Andrew and did nothing. And is still sort of in a position of some authority.
If we have transparency, if that happened, if this legal case ends with imprisonment or not, we have to be careful. Do you think, Andrew, that the monarchy can survive in the hands of William and Kate?
Yes, I think he's very popular. I think he has ideas about how to modernise the monarchy. I think it would be a great success. I mean, it is a reset rather than limping on with the old regime. So I think that could be a very neat solution. I feel sorry for Charles because he's waited all his life for this job, and William clearly would prefer to delay him taking the throne. But in order to preserve the monarchy, I think this may be the only solution.
What do you think William's telling his dad behind the scenes?
Well, I think he's saying, why didn't you deal with this earlier? I've actually got a piece in the Mail today where I give a whole series of moments over the last 15 years when something could have been done, and I'm amazed nothing was done. And I'm afraid they brought this crisis on themselves by doing too little too late, and now they're in this terrible dilemma.
I read also some of the stuff, and seriously, some of the stuff he's done is absolutely brilliant. Andrew sort of out there. A couple of people say it seems to all be on him, but that's not going to go away. What about Fergie? Reports over the weekend that she might be in the UAE. She might have booked into the world's most expensive wellness clinic. Surely she needs to be questioned as well, doesn't she? And her daughters.
Yes, I mean, I think there are a whole series of people who need to be questioned. I mean, I think also the former heads of UKTI, former ambassadors, I mean, all the former members of staff. There are a whole series of people that enabled and protected Andrew. These were people who refused to talk to me. They said, I'm not interested. And I just hope they might now be interested in either talking to the police or talking to a parliamentary committee. I understand Liam Byrne's committee will be meeting on Tuesday to discuss a fuller investigation into Andrew's time as a trade envoy, and I welcome that. You know, we need to get those files of his time as a trade envoy, 2001 to 11, released. I spent 5 years being basically denied access to these files, which I think would show who were on these trips and what business was done, and whether it was in the interest of the British taxpayer or actually just lining Andrew's pocket.
I want to go back to how I started, actually, because you did do this as this sort of lone wolf. Now everybody wants a piece of Andrew Loney, but whether you feel vindicated or not, tell me to mind my own business. How did you suss this out? What were the signs that made you, as a journalist, start digging all those years ago?
Well, I think it goes back to school and seeing bullies get away with behavior, elites basically operating in their own self-interest. And I've always, even as my career in publishing, always been for the underdog, to try and give a voice for those who don't always have a voice. It's, presumably why you're in journalism too, the feeling that we can improve society without seeming too sanctimonious through words and sort of campaigning.
It's really interesting when I look at what you did at the start and where you are now. Every single person, it seems, will come out and say, God, he's an entitled, rude, arrogant, just horrible. Rumour last week, I don't know if you read this, that even as he was being not forcibly removed, but taken out of Royal Lodge at midnight, he was going, well, I'm the Queen's second son. And he's still, I mean, you've seen the Sun today, mate. He still has... You try saying this to Alarm Clock Britain. Sorry you've had a really, really bad day, and you're working really hard. Andy, call me sir. He's struggling, though, Andrew. He's only got a chef and a valet now. Jesus Christ. It just doesn't work, does it?
It is extraordinary. I mean, I certainly talked to members of staff recently, and I was amazed to hear that there was no contrition. It was all about, as you say, him. And I've heard that's the problem. I mean, he can't see anything outside his own self-interest.
Just to finish, if anything, do you believe going forward, whether, Andrew, whatever happens with the court case, whether there is an abdication and a transition, do you believe the monarchy will forevermore have to be more transparent about relationships, business deals and everything to Parliament and to its people in future?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's very interesting that, just as you say, the number of commentators who are saying this, I mean, even people like David Dimbleby, it is the only way forward, and it's long overdue. I mean, things like parliamentary scrutiny and removal of all the exemptions they have, but they need to be more open in terms of their finances, their records, their communication with the press, etc. We need to get rid of, I think, for example, the Royal Rota, the lobby system, which protects journalists, gives them leaks in return for not asking too many tough questions. They are part of a modern democratic society and they have to answer to the people.
Couldn't agree more, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure again. We love talking to you. You've done great work and it rolls on and on. Now, Angela, I'm going to say to you what I said to Kinsey and Andrew Loney earlier. You know me, I'm a royalist. I sense this country has shifted, and if this monarchy is to survive, you might fall off your chair. I think that the king might well have to abdicate, and I think he might well be able to use the excuse that his health is the reason to start a clean slate with William and Kate. So much do I think that this scandal is forcing the monarchy into that position. What are your thoughts?
Well, actually, I felt exactly the same on Friday and Saturday. And then yesterday, I changed my mind because I thought that it was very important to have somebody who knows everything about the royal family, who knows how to deal with things, and actually to get everything calmed down. There's going to be a very long time before we know how much has been in our terrible man has happened or not. And I think that we need someone who's there so stable.
But the problem with that is, and I'm not taking issue, I'm doing what I always do, which is looking at all sides. I fear that the British public, some will say understandably, I'm not going to be moved on that, will say, hold on a second, you must have known. Whether you and your mother say you didn't, where was the £12 million coming from? And I know that Charles is a man, Angela, who believes in the monarchy that much. I just wonder whether that might be his way of saving the monarchy, genuinely.
Well, the money was given by the Queen, the late Queen, and also from the late King, or, well, her husband. The King, Charles, didn't give a penny.
Was he aware of it, though?
I don't know if he was aware of it. His mother might not have told him. We don't actually know. You have to remember that the same thing about Charles knowing things and not knowing things. The Queen died in 2022, right? The things got all wrong from 2019. But the Queen said she didn't want to know anything about anything bad.
Do you think she was duped, Angela? Duped or just blinded by love for her favourite son?
Blinded by love for her favourite son. She said to various people that she did not want to know anything negative, all right? So that's negative in a very big way. And I think for the king to have to try and say, no, you've actually got to listen to this. This is a terrible state. She wouldn't make any changes. She didn't want to know. She wouldn't hear about it. She was extremely unwell. And I think you don't want to make her life even worse than how she was dying. A very, very painful time for her.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because she was, to all of us of all ages, I mean, I said this before, she was this permanently amazing person who was always there. Who was there longer than my own grandparents, for Christ's sake. But, and this is not, listen, you know what my old man did. I'll be a royalist forever, but I have to look at what potentially can happen. What do you think she'd make of it if she was still alive?
Well, she would be absolutely devastated because she adored him. I don't know why she adored him, because he was quite rude to her and would get cross and argue with her, and she would give in. There's just something in him.
I know why she forgave him, but I'm never broadcasting it on this station.
Okay.
You know all of it. Listen, everybody has spoken about the thing that we can't speak about. She was blinded by something unbelievably. Every person, and this is right, Angela, who worked for him, who knew him, who met him, said he's arrogant and entitled. The Sun today, you know, is still saying that as he was, Andy, call me sir, for Christ's sake.
Well, I was going to...
That's just unbelievable.
I was going to say that to you. How could the few servants he's got now being told they've got to call him sir? I'm absolutely furious about that. It made me really angry this morning. How dare he be called sir? He's just a nasty piece, isn't he? And it's going to get worse and worse as we hear what's coming through from America. And you can't call him sir. You just can't.
I mean, it is such a monumentally huge, potentially cataclysmic story for the royal family, and being off last week and sort of watching it was really, really interesting. Let's go back to what I said. Do you think, you've changed your mind and maybe I'll change mine, do you think that abdication talks will be discussed? Do you think that that would ever enter Charles's mind to save the monarchy?
I think that he would know that. He thinks he will know that a lot of thousands of people want him to go. But I think he's got confidence in himself and he wants to keep the country going. And he's got ideas and he does very well looking after people who are ill and keeping us together. I feel that now, and I think that William is in a terrible state. I think he's so angry. I don't think he should do anything.
Is he angry with his father, or is he angry with the situation, Angela?
The situation. I don't think he's angry with his father. He respects his father, and a lot of people say they're having rows, and I go and find from people who know, and they say no, they're just doing this. And I think this is very much from people who want to kill the whole royal family altogether, so they make up stories. I think William is very unhappy by what's happened because he loves love us all and he wants to look after us, but he's not in the mood for it. You see, he's very vulnerable and he's had a lot of difficult things with his wife's cancer and his father's cancer. He was desperately upset when his father was well. He didn't say, oh, great, I can take over. He's not like that. He's very emotional, but he doesn't actually show it.
So you don't think he's been eyeing up the throne during this Andrew crisis?
No, I don't think so. The other reason I don't think so is that he wants to look after his children as much as possible. He wants to be a father. He realises what a mess his childhood was like, and he wants to be there as often as possible and as long as possible to be there for him as a normal father, so that his children would grow up more and more like a normal children.
I'm going to stand back because I'm going to light the touch paper. If you're listening to Angela Levin or watching, stand by for the ultimate question. I know you love her. Do you think Meghan Markle will have been rubbing her hands with glee over this latest crisis, Angela?
No, I think she'll be terrified because if it's happened, she doesn't know what's going to happen to her, where she's been and what she's done. And I think she's very scared.
Really? What do you mean
Yes.
where she's been and what she's done? You're not talking about Epstein's Island, are you?
Well, I'm just talking about generally how she's been, and I'm not going to go into that detail at all. But she's a naughty girl, isn't she? She's a nasty person.
You got to help me out, Angela. You can't drop me at that at 10 to 9. She's been a naughty girl. What do you mean? I mean, she's an overprivileged pain in the backside, but a naughty girl? What are we talking about?
No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh,
you know that. You know exactly what's going on, like I have.
Yeah,
You
I
won't
know.
pull it out of me. But I think she'll be very scared, and I think she will worry too that all this conversation about taking off titles, that she and Harry will get it as well. And then she'll be just an ordinary person. And God, no, she doesn't want to be an ordinary person. She wants to have a title. She doesn't care. She's not interested in the royal family. She just wants the title because it makes her feel good. A title in America is not so important, but it makes her feel good.
And the brand, of course. It's all about the
Everything's-
brand with her, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Everything's failed with her. Everything she's tried to do has not been successful, and neither is her marriage, I believe. And so, if she's scared.
I love it. You don't like Meghan. It's brilliant. I've been my friend forever. Now, we started this by saying we both are. We are both monarchists. And I do generally, as I'm sure you do, have a fear that the tide perhaps is turning. And we know, don't we, over sort of surveys after the last few years, that sort of Republican view is increasing. 2 questions for you, my darling. Does the monarchy survive this crisis?
Well, I hope so. I don't know. I can't sort of know what's going to happen in the next year or so because they might be looking at all these things that Andrew's done for up to a year. So we need to wait. But I do think that the king will put everything he can into calming people and doing his duty.
If not abdication, in your experienced mind, and you would accept that there is a craving and a desire amongst his subjects for more. I know there's been a statement, and I know that it's an ongoing investigation, so it's difficult, and he's the monarch and all that. What do you think he has to do, or what do you think he'll do to try and get his subjects back on side?
I think he needs to do his work. He needs to be going to the places that matter, going abroad because he's welcomed hugely, and that brings money and business to this country, and actually looking after. I mean, when he goes to people who've got cancer, he now goes to lots of hospitals where people are there. He talks to them, he wishes them well, and he's very open. How the Queen wasn't so open. She's a wonderful woman, but you couldn't have that sort of conversation with her. He's open, and I know people who he's been to, they say, oh, he's marvellous, he's so nice to me. And I think that's very important too. So if he goes abroad, he can do all that. He looks after people here. And he does his very best. He knows what he's doing, and he cares. He cares very much about all of us.
I don't doubt that. I just fear, as a monarchist, that might not be enough going forward, and I think that is the real issue for the future of the monarchy. And it might be going forward. They have to be more transparent, and they have to be more open about businesses and relationships and stuff like that. I remember the old man said to me before he died that there was a mystique about the royal family. That's what they used to call it when they worked for the Queen Mother. There was a mystique. But he said, and I might get slagged off for this, that the minute he blamed Charles and Diana and said they both used the media systematically to score points off each other, and the minute that happened, the whole thing transferred. Nobody knew anything about the monarchy before. The world has changed, Angela, hasn't it? And of course, with scandal and with criticism, it feeds the desire for more and makes people question the institution.
Yes, but things might change again.
Yeah.
People who don't want it now might want it very much ahead. Who do we want to stay in his place? I mean, if we don't have anybody who's a member of the royal family, who's going to come? Our Prime Minister, for God's sake? Star, for God's sake.
President. That'll be the next thing, won't it?